Puma claims that its Fast-R Nitro Elite 3 is the fastest running shoe they've ever made, backed by a crazy 3.15% improvement in running economy. And this is their third generation of this shoe. And so we're gonna run these shoes for a test, cut them in half to really figure out if these claims about the shoe are even true. How easy is it to break this really high-end carbon fiber plate? What is the secret of this midsole that almost makes it unwearable as a regular shoe? Actually, it is completely unwearable as a regular shoe. Are they even legal to wear in races? Can you wear them casually? Are these shoes actually faster? Is it all just a gimmick? Why does it have this big snaggle tooth hanging out the front of the toe? What is a race day shoe? And what is the difference between the R2 and the R3? Because in the comparison, I think is where we're really gonna see the soul of this shoe to really figure out, is this actually a function-based shoe that they went all out to try to design the ultimate running shoe? Or is this just a little bit of gimmick marketing branding to sell a shoe to runners that maybe don't know any difference with all the flash and all the bells and whistles without any of the substance? And there's no denying that these shoes are absolutely ridiculous looking in every possible way. And that's because these are race-specific shoes. Because up until the last couple decades, most people just use their everyday running shoes for races. Maybe they'd buy a brand new pair, break them in a little bit, and then wear them on race day. But big brands saw this opportunity to make a race-specific shoe, and almost overnight, these shoes appeared on the market and started breaking world records left and right. And not just by one person. Once one person smashed that record, got access to these super high-end shoes, they got broken over and over and over again. So much so that a lot of these big races and these big organizations completely banned this style of super shoe in races. And a big part of that's because there was replicatable data that showed if you bought a specific pair of shoes, it had a distinct impact on your running times. So in response to this new wave of technology, Puma started working on their super foam-based race day shoes. And in 2022, they've released the very first version of the shoe. In 2024, they released the R2. And in 2025, this year, they released the R3. So what are these shoes? Up first is the brand is Puma. The style is the Fast-R Nitro Elite 2. They weigh 9 ounces, which is hugely important for racing. They retail for $260, which is maybe even more important for racing, especially for a race day shoe, which we'll go over in a sec. They're made in Vietnam, and the way they position this product is conquer your next PB in the high-speed Fast R2, our innovative race day shoes. Engineered for speed, the Fast R2 features podium-worthy Nitro Elite cushioning, plus power plate technology to guide your foot stride to be more powerful and economical. Lightweight ultra-weave materials in the upper provide comfort and breathability, while Puma Grip at the outsole provides traction for the roads. Whether you're running a short race or a marathon, join the high-speed takeover, the Fast-R. Compared to its newest version, brand is Puma. The style is the Fast-R Nitro Elite 3. They weigh 6 ounces this time instead of 9 ounces, so that's a huge reduction, and that's a 30% reduction in weight. But at the same time, these retail for $300, so even more expensive. They're also made in Vietnam, and the way they position this product is Fast R3 is the fastest running shoe we've ever made. Data backed, lab tested, and built for breakthrough. After testing it on elite runners and real athletes, we digitally engineered and optimized the product fully based on data. Fast R3 was designed to shave multiple minutes off your race time with its 3.15% improvement race economy. This translates to an unprecedented potential marathon time saving of more than 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Damn. That's crazy. We just launched the Sundance boots. If you have no idea what a Packer boot is, go watch the video we just launched releasing these, because it's one of the coolest and oldest but forgotten stories of the American West. And these boots have been made in a similar way by whites for like 100 years. So check them out below. Get yourself a pair of Sundance boots. So what is a race day shoe? I had no idea what this was because I'm not a runner. I don't like to run for any reason. Well, it's not like we talked about your everyday running shoe that you run races in. It's a high performance race specific shoe that are so performance based that they don't recommend wearing them as everyday, not just everyday shoes, but everyday running shoes. And that's because these are basically made for one race. And another part of the reason is there's no long-term studies on this unique geometry and this unique style of running that really infuses your running with mechanical advantage. And so they don't even recommend training in these shoes. What this really is this is a track car. And most people that happen to have a track car do not use it as daily drivers for the exact same reasons as these shoes. And one of the biggest reasons is they're expensive. They're specifically designed for race day, exactly like a track car. And so for this video, to really pull as much information out of this and understand this, we're gonna compare it to a track car. And whether they meant to or not, it parallels a race car or a track car perfectly. Starting with the most important thing is they're expensive as hell. These are $260 and $300 for a shoe that was designed potentially for one race. Part of that's not just because they're super high-end running shoes. There's also an economy of scale to consider with this, because it's almost like the difference between a Corvette that Chevy's gonna sell maybe a few thousand of them a year compared to the Malibu that they might sell hundreds of thousands of Malibus. And so the fewer quantity sold, like these shoes, is gonna increase the price because you're not selling hundreds of thousands. You also need precision parts similar to a race car, similar to that Corvette. You can't just rely on off-the-shelf parts. They have to be top-shelf parts and components, and that is not cheap. And And so you're fighting two things. You're fighting the economy of scale of lower quantities and the quality materials and the precision that's needed for a performance shoe. So just comparing the price of a normal shoe compared to a race shoe, you get a pretty clear distinction of the price difference. But more importantly, just to run some quick numbers of like, here's a guess at how many times you're gonna get a wear out of normal shoes compared to, we're just gonna say 5 races. Even though most people that are really taking these seriously, they'll run them one time before the race, if that even, and then they'll throw them away after the race, because after one race, you'll lose some of the performance. And so price per wear is crazy. I don't know if there's any other shoe in the world that's as expensive per wear. And even if you wanted to run 50 races in these are not tuned for everyday use. They're tuned just like a race car, just like a track car, that are tuned for performance, high RPMs, and speed at all cost. For instance, top speed cars, like here in Utah in the salt flats, you can't even drive one of those salt flat cars below 20 miles per hour. You have to have a push car to start it going so that the gear ratio doesn't completely overpower the motor. And it's shockingly similar to these shoes, because these shoes, you can't even stand in these shoes. You can't walk in these shoes, and that's because the geometry is so specifically designed for running that it would have a negative impact on your posture, on your body. It'd overstretch your muscles. And you can see some of the difference that they've started to make in these shoes over the last couple years when it comes to standing around. And I thought for sure that maybe some of the improvements would be, these are easier to stand in, but this newest version is even harder to stand in. You can see that sweeps back even further. You can see the geometry is completely different. One of the coolest aspects of this is that carbon fiber plate on the R2. There's a gap between the arch and the carbon fiber plate, but on this R3, it's completely filled in, and the carbon fiber plate is completely different. So that to me proves that there's no intention of these ever being a standing shoe or a casual shoe in any possible way, because in the next iteration, they made them even harder to stand in. And that's really where the components of these shoes really come into play, because these are not made for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Very similar, once again, comparing like a track car compared to a diesel truck. Diesels are made for 1 million+ miles. Track cars, a lot of them, you have to rebuild the entire engine, or at least the top end, after every few races. And that's because diesels, like your regular casual shoes, they're made of heavy steel block engines, parts that are made to last 1 million miles, and they're made to be dependable over a long period of time, versus the more race-oriented cars, everything is about reducing weight and performance. So how's that translate to these shoes? Well, they use ultra lightweight, high response, high rebound foams. Like in the PUMA R2, this is their Nitro Foam Elite. They say it's premium performance foam technology that provides a pinnacle response and extremely lightweight package. Uses nitrogen infused technology for superior energy return and lightweight cushioning compared to the traditional EVA foam. So this is another really cool thing about cars. So if you've ever seen the GTR, when it first got released, the most recent generation of it, they infused the tires not with air, but with nitrogen, because nitrogen is more stable. It doesn't absorb moisture in the air nearly as much. It's lighter and it's more predictable at high speeds. So they literally put nitrogen inside of car tires. And so that's the exact same idea here. So instead of putting air throughout this entire foam trapped in all those little teeny microscopic bubbles that can absorb moisture in the air, cause hydrolysis. And so they literally pulled that exact same inspiration from racing and infused it into the foam of a running shoe. That blows my mind. And PUMA says about the nitrogen infused foam, nitrogen is used during the foam creation process to fine tune the softness and bounce of the midsole. And for the R3, I don't think a single thing has changed with the actual compound. There's no information on their site that says it's changed in any way, but the application of the foam definitely is. Not just in the shape, but actual densities and hardnesses. Because there's essentially 4 different foams in this midsole of the shoe. And so we measured every single one of these foams, and they are fine-tuned to different durometers, different hardnesses, different densities. And so here's all your measurements of the R2 and the R3, just to give you a quick comparison. And the craziest thing about this foam to me is these are so light. These are 6 ounces. These are absolutely ridiculously soft and responsive and lightweight. This foam is really impressive in every possible way, except maybe durability, but we'll go over that in a sec. But when it comes to responsiveness, we did the ball drop test to see which one of these performed a little bit better on the inside of the shoe. Well, I thought for sure the R3 was gonna perform better, but the R2 bounced up at 19.5 inches, where the R3 bounced up at 16.8 inches. So a little bit more responsive on the inside with the insoles in. So pretty impressive results for the R2. Then we did the bar drop test. It's a lot heavier, and on the heel, the 2s bounced up 8.9 inches and the 3s bounced up 8.25 inches. So once again, the R3 outperformed it. The only advantage that we've seen so far of the R3 over the 2 is that it's 30% lighter. But keep in mind, these are far from the scientific tests that they're running on these shoes. This is literally just some garage science to try to pull some rough information. So take it with a grain of salt. So it's got this crazy responsive foam, but there's one problem with that, and that is the durability. Because even on their website, if you come down right here at the bottom here, it has a lifespan of the shoe. They have a targeted lifespan of 150 kilometers. What is that in miles? I don't know. That's 93 miles. And just like a race car, they're not made for durability. And so I just wanted to do a quick rip test to see how hard it is to pull this foam off of the actual shoe. because when I was prepping for this, I felt like I kept almost pulling it apart. And so that's the same concept as like tires on a race car. You've got to replace the tires every so often. Yeah, this is so easy. So that's part of why there's only less than a 100-mile lifespan on these shoes. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing because this is how race cars are made. Look at that, just completely chunking this thing apart. Just look how responsive that foam is compared to like a styrofoam. That is crazy. So case in point, they're just not made for durability. They're made basically for 1 or 2 races, and that's it. Because your fastest cars in the world are not the most durable cars in the world. When you reach those upper echelons of performance, you're also reaching those upper echelons of fragility to get those extra little bits of performance. And speaking of replacing tires, you can see on the R2, they had a little bit of tread on here. It was a pretty thick tread. Then on the R2s, I thought someone ran in these because they're so bald. I was like, did someone like put these on the sander? The outsole on the R3 is like 1.5 millimeters thick, where these are like, this one's like 3 millimeters. So we identified at least one thing that reduced the weight. And that's another huge aspect of this shoe and track cars, is it's all about the power to weight ratio. You can have the most high performance engine in the world, but if your car weighs 10,000 pounds, it doesn't mean anything. Same exact things with these shoes. You could be in perfect physical shape, but if you're wearing 3-pound Pacific Northwest boots on a marathon, first of all, you're gonna injure yourself, but also you're gonna lose for sure because of that power to weight ratio. In track cars, what they do is a lot of times they don't have any semblance of a regular body. Sometimes they even just have one single shell that goes around the entire body, like drag cars or like NASCARs. And they do this to make everything more simple, make it more light, more streamlined, and even down to the seat on the inside, bare minimum foam, just a frame of a seat and a 5-point harness to make sure the driver stays in, but bare minimum. So how's that compare to these shoes? Well, they took that exact same concept of that shell around the outside of the car and applied it to around the foot, because this is the most ridiculous and thin and most breathable upper I've ever seen in any shoe we've reviewed. The R2 has a super open, they call it ultra weave, that you can literally count the threads and how it's all put together because of how open it is. Like, here's a quick breathability test of the R2. This material is only 0.4 millimeters thick. They call it their ultra weave. That's an extremely lightweight and high strength single layer material reinforced with power tape for durability and lockdown, 80% textile and 20% synthetic. And then once again with the R3, they took it even further. So this is only 0.3 millimeters thick. It's even more open, it's even lighter, it's even more breathable, and it's that exact concept of having one single layer wrapping all the way around your shoe as lightweight as possible while still keeping your foot in the shoe. But they've even taken it further from the R2 to the R3, because the R2 has some comfort features in here. You can see they got a little padding in the heel. The collar is kind of a knit material and through the tongue, which actually this knit material is really cool. It stretches in like a cool 3-dimensional way. But for the R3 to reduce weight again at the expense of comfort, they use that exact same material in the tongue. You can barely even call it a tongue because it's such a microscopic thin layer of material. And you still have some padding in the heel, but that's been one of the complaints that people have about the R3, is that they remove so much of the comfort that people are complaining that these aren't comfortable and that the tongue doesn't lay flat and there's too many pinch points on the laces. So it's the exact same thing again. There's never been a seat in a race car that's ever been comfortable. And on top of that, a lot of these race cars really emphasize mechanical advantages as much as possible. They use extremely wide wheelbases, airfoils, spoilers, and that's not only to reduce the amount of drag, but it's also to convert that drag into downforce to improve the performance of the car. And this shoe does a very similar thing with this little snaggle-tooth carbon fiber thing at the end here. What this seems to be for is to give you just that little bit of extra mechanical leverage on every step. It's almost like a little springboard attached to the very tip of your shoe. And on the R2, you did have a few aerodynamic designs here with this little shark fin that they did remove in the R3. And I think it really works. I think there's a reason why it's been in the 2 and the 3, is I think that does give you just a little bit of extra push. And the cool thing is it's not just this little nib of carbon fiber right here, it's part of this entire shank that runs all the way through the shoe. And they call this their power plate technology. It's a full-length carbon fiber plate engineered for race day to provide maximal propulsion with extension beyond the toe to increase propulsion and step length stride after stride on race day. And that's exactly what this carbon fiber plate is for. It's once again a mechanical advantage. Instead of just running barefoot and utilizing your tendons and your muscles to push you and spring you forward, this uses that carbon fiber plate to take a lot of that force and apply it to that carbon fiber plate. And as that gets compressed, all that potential energy springs out, pushing you forward in every single step. And this clearly works. You've seen it in a lot of performance shoes. There's clear advantage. And a lot of that comes down to the carbon fiber plate. And just to see how strong they were, to see how much deflection it takes to really bend them, we did this little resting / bar drop test. We rested on the toe. Here's the results. Dropped it a little bit higher, bent the toe a little little bit, dropped it a little bit higher, bent the toe all the way back. But the crazy thing is it didn't snap the carbon fiber. Just to put it in perspective, we also compared it to this, like a regular, more foam-based running shoe like the Hoka Cliftons, and you can see that distinct difference between the rigidity and the strength of that carbon fiber plate compared to not having. And then we compared these two, and as you can see, pretty good results. If anything, I think the R3 is more flexible, and I think it has a significant amount more torsional flex. And so I was surprised that the R2 is more rigid than the R3, but I think that's a performance thing. I don't think they accidentally made the R3 less rigid. So to me, it seems like they just tuned that carbon fiber just a little bit more, reduced the thickness a little bit, more importantly, to give you a little bit more articulation, just in case you run in different ways or you roll as you run. Having just a little bit more torsional flex seems to be the goal with this carbon fiber plate in the R3. And you can see that it is a difference, because the R2, you've got this big single rib, and then it splits a little bit at the toe, but it comes back together, and then it looks like the same thing at the heel. Whereas the R3, it splits right at the toe, but also splits at the heel, and it's a lot thinner. It's got 2 ribs instead of 1, and it's a thinner carbon fiber. But there is a severe flaw in carbon fiber, and that is if you do break it, there's no repairing it. It is broken for good. You gotta buy a brand new pair of $300 shoes, and that's the same as racing. It's really high performance in a lot of ways, but it's just not the most durable. So pretty clearly, at least from the outside, these are made specifically for races. And you can see why I thought this was a perfect example for race cars. And just like a race car, the reason I wanted to do the R2 and the R3 is because with a track car, you're endlessly iterating to try to just squeeze fractions of a second out of your gear. And that's why, even though these are essentially the same running shoe, just a couple years apart, or even a year apart, they've changed so much of it. So now, let's try to break these carbon fiber plates, cut them in half, and really see, are these actually the race car of the shoe world, or is it just a gimmick to sell $300 shoes to wear one time to people that don't know any different? Just taking pictures of my cat, okay? This is our most popular camera harness, and in my opinion, the most comfortable way to carry one camera. Because as you can see, made of premium leather, solid brass hardware, so it's not gonna wear out and rust and ruin your clothes. But more importantly, look at the contouring. Not just straight lines, not straight straps like every other camera harness out there. It actually contours and flows with your body to make that weight distributed a lot more equally. And even when you're not using it, if you want all that weight off your back and shoulders, got these little hip clips on our custom hardware. It allows you to clip it right to your hip, to put it more on your hips where it's a lot more comfortable to have that kind of weight. So ease your back pain, ease your neck pain, put all the weight of this heavy camera not on your neck, put it equally distributed with the Lone Bandit camera harness. You'd have to really flex it. That was the first crack, was when it was flexed about like that. Oh. That's not very strong. Ooh, you all right? The first time. All right, we got them both cut in half, and if you're not subscribed, consider pushing that little subscribe button. Check out our handmade leather goods we make right here in the shop by me and my crew. Check out our collaborations, because that's how we can afford to buy $560 worth of stuff just to destroy it, to show you what you're actually spending your money on, and if they're actually what they say they are. So now, let's start with R2, D2. They're so light, I almost like can't hang on to them. So what's on the inside? Very, very similar, but with some distinct differences, because you can see one of the biggest differences is they filled in that gap right there where the foam was. And now we can test all these different foams, and all those durometers are backed up. Another thing that I noticed was this rubber wraps all the way around the toe. That's maybe one example of them trying to improve durability at the expense of weight, even if it is just minuscule. They definitely did change the carbon fiber plate too. You can see how much thinner it is. It's like half the thickness. You can see it does split right here at the heel, giving you that little bit of torsional flex. You can really see how thin that outsole is now. But now we know those carbon fiber plates are not that strong. So not that anyone's gonna go around trying to break these shoes in half, but if you buy a pair of $300 shoes, you better understand that you can't bend them too much or you're out $300. You can also see this heel profile is completely different, a lot more sloped in. You can really see what I meant about this lining being a really unique fabric compared to the just ultra thin, what do they call this, ultra weave. And what I think is really cool is the geometry of this bend. You know, they did say in the description that it was an extended carbon fiber plate, which is definitely not true. It's shorter for sure, or at least it ends shorter than the other shoe. So I don't know what they're on about that. That's definitely not right. But I just love the simplicity of it. Because what you really have here is you've got an outsole, you've got a carbon fiber shank, you've got a foam midsole, an insole, and then the absolute thinnest material possible to wrap around your foot, and just a little bit of padding in the heel. It's really like 5 components. Even though it looks super complex and all over the place and all this geometry and stuff, it's only a handful of components, and it's only 6 ounces. So to the questions we pose, can I break the carbon fiber plate? Definitely. Is it real carbon fiber? It is real carbon fiber. So then what is the secret of this midsole? Well, I think it is the geometry, but I think it's that nitrogen infused, super high-end foam. It almost doesn't feel like you can't, it doesn't feel like you should be able to run on this. It's so soft and squishy, but it has so much rebound to it. I love that nitrogen infused midsole. Plus the backing of the carbon fiber plate. So they took 2 of the most responsive materials that we have in not just footwear industry, but all industries, in carbon fiber that's really rigid, lightweight, and is really good at energy return, combining it with these ultra foams that have completely changed the world, not just in footwear, but across the board. And I think those 2 things are the real secret of this. So why are some of these shoes not legal? Well, it's because they do give you a very distinct mechanical advantage over anybody that can't afford a $300 pair of race shoes. And so you can understand, even if they didn't have the hard data to back it up, that they might want to just remove it. It's like wearing roller skates on a marathon. It's just not fair because you're relying on the equipment more than you are relying on yourself. I'm shocked that these are still legal to wear in some races. So then are these race day specific shoes, or is this just a gimmick? To me, this is really clear that they did go all out, that they charged $300 for a reason, regardless of if you could ever even want to justify spending $300 on a race shoe. I don't think this is a scam. I don't think this is a gimmick. I think they really went deep into design, into biomechanics, into cutting edge material science technology to actually make a shoe that gives you replicatable data. And I can't help but appreciate that. I love race cars, I love track cars, and this is the race car of the footwear world. There's no denying it. It's like parallels it in so many ways. That's why I wanted to do both of these shoes, because a big part of racing is not how fast you go. It's the obsession of the improvement and progress, the endless pursuit of speed that is core to any form of race. And real racing is done in the off-season. It's in the training, it's in the incremental growth, it's in the improvement of design, it's the improvement of yourself. It's pushing yourself day after day after day over long periods of time. That gap between the R2 and the R3 tells us more about these shoes and the brand and the intention than anything else. Because in between these 2 shoes is really where the races ran. And I do not think this is a brand trying to capitalize on a trend. To me, this is a beautiful example of function over form to the ultimate degree, at the expense of comfort, at the expense of aesthetics, at the expense of everything but speed. That's what the shoe is. And that to me proves that these really are the race cars of shoes. So let me know what you guys think and your opinion of these. And if you want to support us, give us that like, a little subscribe, check out our handmade leather goods via links in the description. And thank you guys for all your support. See ya. PUMA pants. PUMA pants. PUMA pants.